Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History for Deep Rest. Tonight we step carefully onto a narrow strip of dark wood that rocks beneath your boots as the evening tide begins to turn. The air smells sharply of salt and damp rope. Somewhere out on the dim horizon, the last light of day sinks like a tired ember into the sea. You feel the deck shift alive under your weight, and you suddenly understand that the world you are about to sleep in will never stay still. This is not a quiet bedroom with soft walls and a polite little night lamp. This is a floating plank between you and a very cold eternity. You probably will not survive this. Or at least you would not if you had no idea what the Vikings knew about resting in the worst possible places. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are settling in, tell me where you are listening from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, the story flows around you as naturally as the tide itself. You stand among men who already know how this night will feel. Their movements are slow but purposeful, like people performing a ritual they have repeated too many times to question. The sky above is not fully dark yet. A pale wash of silver lingers behind the clouds, making the sea look like hammered metal. You taste the chill before you feel it. It enters through your breath and settles somewhere deep in your chest. The longship beneath you is narrow and graceful, its curved prow rising like a creature testing the wind. A commonly recognized historical fact quietly shapes your awareness. Viking longships were designed to be swift and flexible, built with overlapping wooden planks that allowed them to ride waves rather than fight them. That clever construction makes the vessel strong in motion, but offers little in the way of comfort once night falls. There is no cabin waiting to welcome you, no snug compartment where you can stretch and forget the outside world. Instead, you notice how the crew begins to claim small territories along the deck, not with argument or loud instruction, just with the subtle language of experience. A rolled bundle placed here, a coiled rope shifted there, a shield leaned against the side like a silent promise of protection. You sense that space itself is precious. Each man seems to measure his sleeping place with care, as though mapping an invisible border between endurance and misery. The wind grows steadier. It pushes against your cloak and slips easily through the weave of the wool. You try to imagine what warmth might feel like out here. Then you watch one sailor spread a thick animal skin over a narrow stretch of planking. The fur catches the faint light and glows softly. Another man tucks his feet beneath a folded sail. A quirky little detail drifts into your thoughts like a half-remembered story. Some scholars believe Vikings sometimes used dried moss or seaweed as extra insulation on long voyages, creating makeshift padding that could absorb moisture and add a surprising layer of warmth. It is not luxury, but it is something. Out here, something can mean everything. The ship creaks as though speaking in its sleep. Timber presses against timber. The mast hums with a low vibration that travels down into the deck and up through your legs. You realize that silence at sea is never complete. There is always a whisper, always a murmur. Even the water itself seems to breathe. You glance toward the horizon and feel how small the world has become. Just this narrow vessel, just this uncertain night. Historians still argue whether Viking crews truly slept deeply during ocean crossings, or if most nights were spent in brief stretches of half-rest, one eye open to danger. You begin to understand why the debate exists. Already your muscles tighten at every sudden splash of wave against the hull. Every shift in balance feels like a question, with no easy answer. How do you surrender to sleep when the ground beneath you refuses to stay loyal? A man nearby laughs softly as though sensing your unease. He wraps his cloak tighter and lowers himself onto his chosen patch of deck. His movements are careful, economical. You follow his example. The wood is colder than you expected. It steals warmth from your body with quiet efficiency. You draw your knees closer instinctively, seeking some shape that will hold heat. Above you, the first stars appear faint but determined. The night deepens. The silver sky fades to a heavier shade of blue. The wind carries scents that seem older than language. Salt, wet leather, the faint lingering smoke from a cooking fire that was extinguished hours ago. You wonder how many journeys like this have unfolded in darkness across these waters. How many tired souls have closed their eyes on this same restless deck and trusted that morning would come. A slow drowsiness begins to gather at the edges of your thoughts. Not the gentle sleepiness of a warm room, something more cautious, more deliberate. You feel as though your body is negotiating with the cold, promising to rest only if the sea behaves, promising to remain alert even in dreams. The rhythm of the waves becomes a strange lullaby, not soothing exactly, but persistent enough to wear down resistance. You shift again, trying to find the angle that hurts least. Around you, other shapes settle into stillness. Cloaks rise and fall with quiet breathing. A shield rattles faintly as the ship rolls. Somewhere near the stern, someone mutters in sleep, then falls silent. The longship glides onward through darkness, carrying you into a world where rest is never separate from survival. You sense that this is only the beginning, that tonight will teach you lessons your comfortable life has never required. For now you let your eyes close, just for a moment, just long enough to feel the sea cradle you in its cold, indifferent arms. And as the ship continues its steady journey into night, you drift toward the fragile edge of Viking sleep, wondering how many hours of endurance still lie ahead. The cold wakes you before you realize you have truly fallen asleep. It seeps into your awareness like a slow tide returning to shore. At first, you're unsure what has changed. The stars still burn above you. The ship still rocks with that same stubborn rhythm, yet your body feels different now, stiffer, as though the night itself has crept into your joints and settled there without permission. You draw a deeper breath and taste frost in the air. Around you shapes shift beneath layers of wool and fur. The crew is not fully awake, not fully asleep. They exist in that curious middle space that long experience has taught them to accept. You begin to notice how they lie close together, shoulders nearly touching, feet tucked toward the warmth of another human presence. It is not sentiment that draws them inward. It is simple necessity. The heat of shared bodies becomes a quiet shield against the cold wind prowling along the deck. A widely accepted historical observation slips gently into your thoughts. Viking clothing was typically made from thick wool, sometimes lined with fur materials that retained warmth even when damp. You run your fingers along the rough fibres of your own borrowed cloak and feel how it traps a small pocket of comfort against your skin. The texture scratches slightly, yet you welcome the sensation. It reminds you that warmth can come in forms that are far from gentle. Someone nearby adjusts a bundle beneath his head. You watch him pull a rolled garment closer, creating a barrier between his neck and the frozen planking. Another sailor curls into himself like a resting animal, his back forming a curved wall against the wind. Their movements are practiced, almost instinctive. You realize that sleep here is not about surrender. It is about strategy. Every limb has a purpose, every fold of fabric becomes a tiny defense. The night air grows sharper. A breeze slides beneath your cloak and makes you shiver despite your efforts. You glance toward the sail, now lowered, and tied its heavy canvas glistening faintly with moisture. A curious detail surfaces in your mind, one that might make you smile if your teeth were not busy chattering. Some researchers suggest that sailors sometimes warmed stones by the fire before nightfall and tucked them near their feet to create fleeting islands of heat. You imagine the comfort such a simple trick could bring, the way warmth might bloom briefly in the darkness like a secret. Historians still debate whether Viking crews developed formal routines for rotating sleeping positions during long voyages, ensuring that each person gained some measure of shelter from the wind. As you observe the subtle shifts unfolding around you, the idea seems entirely plausible. A man who faced the open sea earlier now rests with his back against the hull, protected by the bodies of his companions. Another takes his place at the edge, accepting the cold with a weary sort of courage. You try to mimic their calm. You draw your knees tighter and tuck your hands beneath your arms. The posture feels awkward at first, yet gradually a fragile warmth begins to gather. It is not the enveloping comfort of a hearth. It is more like a truce. Your body agrees to remain still, and the cold agrees not to bite quite so fiercely. Sound continues to shape the night. You hear the faint rasp of breathing, the creak of leather straps, the distant sigh of waves brushing the hull. Occasionally, the ship tilts in a way that makes your stomach tighten, then settles again as though nothing has happened. You begin to understand how exhaustion becomes a kind of companion on these journeys. It persuades you to rest even when reason whispers that vigilance would be wiser. A sailor murmurs something in his sleep. The words are lost to the wind, yet the tone carries a hint of home. You wonder what memories travel with him across this restless sea. Perhaps he dreams of a smoky hall filled with laughter and firelight. Perhaps he dreams of green fields where the ground does not sway beneath his feet. The thought makes your own heart ache with a longing you cannot quite name. The stars wheel slowly overhead. Their pale light reveals a world stripped to essentials: wood, water, sky, human breath rising in thin clouds. You sense how little stands between survival and surrender out here. And yet the crew persists. They adapt. They fold themselves into the narrow spaces offered by fate and find ways to endure. A steady drowsiness returns heavier now, as though your body has accepted the terms of this strange environment. You feel the warmth of another shoulder brushing yours. It is accidental. It is necessary. You do not pull away. Instead, you allow the contact to anchor you, to remind you that you are not alone in this fragile, floating world. The longship glides onward, its curved shape cutting silently through dark water. Somewhere ahead, unseen shores wait beneath the same cold stars. For now the task is simpler: to rest, to gather strength in whatever imperfect ways are available. You close your eyes once more, trusting that shared warmth and stubborn resilience will carry you through another stretch of night. You wake again without truly deciding to. The ship shifts beneath you in a slow, deliberate roll that feels different from before. Your body has begun to learn the language of motion. You recognize when the sea is merely restless and when it is quietly testing the strength of wood and rope. This time it feels like the latter. The night has deepened into something vast and almost thoughtful. Even the stars seem more distant now. You push yourself up on one elbow and immediately regret it as the cold rushes into every space your cloak had been protecting. Your breath clouds the air. The deck glistens faintly with moisture that has settled like a thin, invisible skin. Somewhere nearby, a man adjusts the position of a shield so that it leans more securely against the side of the vessel. The simple movement draws your attention to a truth you had not fully considered before. This ship itself is the only shelter you have. A well-established historical reality comes gently into focus. Viking longships were often built low and sleek to move swiftly across water, which meant that sailors remained exposed to wind and spray for most of their journey. You run your hand along the inner curve of the hull and feel how the planks overlap like scales. The craftsmanship is remarkable. Each board fits with careful intention, allowing the vessel to flex with the sea rather than resist it. Yet that same elegance leaves little room for comfort. Protection here is measured in inches and angles rather than walls. You notice how the crew has made subtle use of these narrow margins. Some lie with their backs pressed firmly against the hull, letting the wood shield them from the strongest gusts. Others position their bundles of gear in small stacks that create low barriers against the creeping damp. A quirky observation drifts into your thoughts like a stray gull crossing the moon. In certain sagas, sailors are described using their round shields as makeshift windbreaks, at night propping them upright to form a crude defensive line against the cold. Whether every crew followed this practice is uncertain, yet the idea feels entirely believable as you watch the quiet ingenuity unfolding around you. The ship groans softly as it meets another rolling swell. The sound is not alarming. It is more like an old house settling into itself. Still, you cannot ignore the sense that you are suspended between elements that care nothing for your comfort. The sea breathes, the wind prowls, the longship answers each movement with a patient resilience that begins to inspire your trust. Historians still argue whether Viking crews ever attempted to rig temporary coverings across the deck during calmer conditions, perhaps stretching spare cloth or sail fragments to create a fragile canopy. As you glance upward, you try to imagine what that might look like. A thin roof of fabric trembling in the night, shadow shifting across it like drifting thoughts. For now there is only open sky. It presses down on you with an immensity that feels both beautiful and slightly terrifying. You lower yourself, again careful to find the same narrow hollow your body shaped earlier. The wood beneath you has grown colder, or perhaps you've grown more sensitive. You tuck your cloak tighter and angle your feet towards a small cluster of sleeping forms. Their presence radiates a faint warmth that feels almost miraculous. It reminds you how survival at sea is rarely a solitary achievement. Even rest becomes a shared endeavour. Sound returns as your constant companion. The slap of wave against hull, the whisper of rope brushing wood, the steady rhythm of breathing around you. You begin to notice smaller noises as well. The faint creak of leather as someone turns in sleep. The soft clink of metal against metal where weapons rest within reach. These details weave together into a strange lullaby, one that tells you the ship is still moving, still alive. A sailor near the bow shifts and mutters a brief prayer before settling again. You do not know the words yet, the gesture carries a quiet gravity. Out here, belief may serve as another kind of shelter, not one that blocks the wind or dries the spray, but one that steadies the mind when darkness feels endless. You wonder how many nights like this have been endured by men who trusted both their craftsmanship and their gods. The horizon is invisible now. Sea and sky have merged into a single vast shade of midnight. You sense rather than see the motion beneath you. The longship glides forward like a creature that knows its path even when you do not. You begin to understand how familiarity can turn hardship into routine. What once felt unbearable becomes simply another fact of existence. A faint drowsiness returns, this time threaded with a curious acceptance. You are no longer surprised by the cold. You are no longer startled by every shift of balance. Instead, you listen. You feel. You allow the ship itself to cradle you in its narrow embrace. Sleep here is not an escape. It is a negotiation with the elements. A quiet agreement to trust the vessel, the crew, and the stubborn strength within your own body. As your eyes drift closed once more, you sense the longship carrying you deeper into the night, offering what little shelter it can while the sea continues its endless, restless song. You do not know how long you have been drifting in and out of shallow sleep, when a sudden tilt of the deck reminds you that rest on this voyage will always be provisional. Your body reacts before your thoughts catch up. Muscles tighten, hands brace instinctively against the cold planking. Then the longship steadies again, sliding over the dark water with patient confidence. The moment passes, yet it leaves a faint echo in your chest. You realize that every sleeping position here is chosen with care, shaped by experience and necessity. You shift slightly and feel how little room you truly have. To your left, a sailor lies curled tightly on his side cloak, pulled over his head like a small tent. To your right, another rests on his back with knees bent, feet angled beneath a bundle of gear. No one stretches out fully. No one claims more space than survival allows. A broadly accepted historical insight drifts into your awareness. Viking ships often carried crews far larger than their narrow decks might comfortably support, meaning that sailors learned to rest in compact postures during long crossings. Comfort was never the goal. Efficiency was. The wood beneath you has absorbed the chill of the night. It presses upward through your layers, reminding you that the sea is always waiting just beyond the hull. You experiment with folding yourself more tightly, drawing your limbs inward until you resemble the shapes around you. The posture feels strange at first, almost offensive, yet gradually you sense how it preserves warmth. Your breathing slows. The cold does not vanish, but it loses some of its sharpest edges. A curious and lesser-known detail wanders into your thoughts like a quiet companion. Some maritime historians have suggested that experienced sailors could sleep with one arm looped through a rope, or wedged against a fixed object, preventing themselves from sliding dangerously as the ship rolled. You glance at the rigging above and wonder how often such small precautions made the difference between rest and sudden alarm. The idea carries a certain practicality that feels entirely in keeping with this environment. Around you, the arrangement of bodies forms an unspoken pattern. Those with greater responsibility seem to position themselves where they can rise quickly if needed. Others tuck into the most sheltered corners, accepting protection without complaint. You notice how hierarchy does not vanish at night. It simply becomes quieter. A man near the stern sleeps with his head propped against a carved support beam, his posture suggesting both fatigue and readiness. Even in stillness, he appears to be listening. Scholars still debate the extent to which Viking crews practiced organized sleeping shifts during peaceful voyages, rotating between rest and watchfulness to balance exhaustion with safety. As you observe the subtle awakenings and adjustments unfolding in the darkness, the theory seems plausible. Someone rises briefly to check a rope. Another sits upright for a moment, scanning the horizon that cannot be seen. Then they settle again, trading places with those who have just closed their eyes. The sea itself seems to approve of this quiet choreography. Waves lift the ship in slow, measured pulses. The mast hums softly, a low vibration that travels through wood and bone alike. You begin to recognize that true stillness does not exist here. Instead, there is a constant negotiation between motion and balance. Your body learns to follow that rhythm, surrendering tension little by little. You press your cheek against the rough wool of your cloak and catch the faint scent of lanolin mixed with salt. It is not unpleasant. It speaks of animals and long journeys, and the stubborn determination to make do with whatever materials are available. Nearby, someone shifts and lets out a slow breath that sounds almost like a sigh of contentment. You wonder if he has found a pocket of warmth, a fleeting moment of comfort that feels like victory. The stars above have grown brighter, their reflections trembling across the restless surface of the sea. You watch them for a while, feeling the quiet awe that often arrives when exhaustion loosens the mind. The world seems both enormous and strangely intimate. Just this vessel, just these companions, just the endless night unfolding one wave at a time. A deeper drowsiness begins to gather again, heavier, now shaped by repetition. You are learning how to fold yourself into the narrow spaces provided, learning how to trust the curved shelter of the hull and the steady presence of those around you. Learning that sleep here is not a single long descent into dreams, but a series of brief descents and cautious returns. As you close your eyes once more, you feel the longship carry you forward through darkness, its fragile wooden form offering all the protection it can. The cold remains, the motion continues, yet you sense a growing resilience within yourself, a quiet understanding that rest, like everything else on this voyage, is something you must shape with patience and resolve. A sudden spray of icy droplets lands across your face and pulls you back from the edge of sleep. For a moment you lie still, unsure whether you dreamed the sensation. Then another fine mist drifts over the deck, catching the starlight like shattered glass. The sea has grown more restless, not violent, not yet, but unsettled in a way that reminds you how fragile comfort can be out here. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the narrow arrangement of bodies around you. Cloaks glisten faintly with moisture. The fur that once promised warmth now feels heavy and cool to the touch. You wipe your cheek and taste salt on your lips. It is sharp and oddly invigorating, like a reminder that the world is larger than your small patch of deck. A commonly recognized historical reality takes shape in your thoughts. Sailors in the North Atlantic often endured constant dampness during long voyages, as sea spray and rain soaked clothing and bedding alike. Unlike modern waterproof fabrics, their wool and leather could retain warmth even when wet, yet the sensation of chill never entirely vanished. You pull your cloak tighter and understand that dryness is a luxury no one expects tonight. The wind shifts again, bringing with it a faint drizzle that whispers against the sail. Tiny droplets gather on your eyelashes. You blink them away and notice how the crew responds without complaint. One man turns his shield at an angle to deflect the worst of the spray. Another slides closer to a stack of gear, using it as a barrier against the gusts. Their actions are quiet, deliberate. No one wastes energy on frustration. Endurance is simply part of the rhythm of life at sea. A curious and slightly unexpected tidbit drifts into your mind like a passing wave. Some experimental archaeologists have attempted to recreate Viking voyages and discovered that layered wool cloaks, when wrung out and shaken free of excess water, could dry surprisingly quickly in strong wind. The idea feels almost comforting. Even in misery there are practical solutions. Even in cold darkness there are small victories waiting to be claimed. You shift your position again, searching for the elusive balance between warmth and stability. The deck beneath you feels slick now, its surface transformed by the constant kiss of salt water. You tuck one arm beneath your head and angle your knees toward a companion whose steady breathing radiates a faint, reassuring heat. The posture is far from graceful, yet it helps. Your body seems to recognize the wisdom of drawing inward, conserving energy like a flame protected from the wind. Academics continue to discuss whether Viking crews ever developed specific nighttime routines for dealing with prolonged damp conditions, perhaps scheduling brief intervals to adjust clothing or redistribute blankets. As you observe the subtle movements unfolding around you, the notion appears entirely sensible. A man rises, quietly, shakes out his cloak, then settles again with renewed determination. Another reaches for a bundle of furs and shares its edge with a neighbour without a word. The sounds of the night have changed as well. The steady murmur of waves is now punctuated by the soft hiss of drizzle and the occasional slap of water against the hull. The longship answers each impact with a low, resonant creak that travels through your bones. You begin to sense that the vessel itself is participating in this struggle against discomfort. Its curved form sheds much of the spray. Its flexible planks absorb the force of the sea. It offers what little protection it can. You glance upward and see clouds drifting across the stars, their edges glowing faintly in the pale light. The sky feels closer somehow, as though it too is watching this quiet contest between human resilience and natural indifference. Your thoughts wander briefly to warmer places, a firelit hall, the smell of roasting meat, the steady comfort of unmoving ground. Then another gust of wind pulls you back to the present with gentle insistence. Fatigue settles over you again, heavier than before, yet it is not entirely unwelcome. It carries a strange kind of peace, a sense that you are beginning to accept the terms of this journey. You no longer expect perfect rest. You no longer imagine escaping the cold entirely. Instead, you focus on what is possible. A sheltered angle, a shared blanket, a moment of stillness between the waves. Around you, the crew sinks once more into their uneasy slumber. Shapes become shadows. Breath becomes mist. The drizzle softens until it is little more than a memory clinging to your skin. The longship glides onward, its dark silhouette cutting through the silvered water, like a promise that morning will eventually return. You close your eyes again, feeling the damp cloak settle around you like a second skin. Somewhere in the distance, unseen shores wait beyond the horizon. For now the task remains simple, to endure this night, to gather strength from small comforts, to trust that even in the coldest hours sleep can still find you if you are patient enough to welcome it. You wake to a quieter kind of darkness. The drizzle has faded. The wind still moves across the sea, yet its edge feels less sharp, as though the night itself has grown tired of testing you. For a few long breaths, you simply lie where you are aware of the steady lift and fall beneath your back. The ship feels almost gentle now, rocking with a rhythm that begins to resemble something close to reassurance. Around you, the crew has changed their arrangement again. The sail that once strained against the mast has been lowered completely and folded into a thick, heavy mass. In the dim starlight, it resembles a sleeping animal curled along the deck. You notice how several men have drawn closer to it, using its bulk as a barrier against the lingering chill. The idea seems obvious once you see it. Objects that serve one purpose by day can become something entirely different by night. A well-known historical observation drifts into your thoughts like a lantern glimpsed through fog. Viking sailors often relied on multi-purpose equipment during long voyages since space was limited and survival demanded flexibility. A sail might become bedding. An oar might serve as a brace to steady the body while resting. Even a coil of rope could transform into a makeshift pillow. You watch these quiet adaptations unfolding and feel a growing respect for the ingenuity that allows humans to endure in such exposed conditions. You sit up slowly and notice that the air smells faintly of tar and damp wood. The scent is grounding in a curious way. It reminds you that this vessel is not simply a fragile raft at the mercy of the sea. It is a carefully built machine shaped by generations of knowledge. The planks overlap with deliberate precision. The ribs beneath them hold firm like the bones of some great sea creature. You begin to understand how trust in craftsmanship becomes another form of shelter. A small and slightly unusual detail surfaces in your mind as you watch a sailor wedge his foot against an oar laid along the deck. Some maritime researchers have suggested that crew members sometimes used rowing benches or loose gear as anchors for their bodies during sleep, preventing sudden shifts from sending them sliding across wet planking. The practice might seem awkward to modern sensibilities, yet here it appears entirely practical. Stability, even in the smallest measure, is a gift. Scholars continue to examine whether Viking crews deliberately created wind shadows by stacking equipment in strategic ways during calm stretches of travel. As you glance around, the theory feels less like speculation and more like quiet truth. Shields lean together in a shallow arc, bundles of provisions form low walls, the folded sail rises like a protective ridge. None of it is elegant, all of it is effective. You draw closer to this improvised shelter, easing yourself into the narrow space between sailcloth and hull. The difference is subtle but unmistakable. The wind softens. The air feels fractionally warmer. You let out a breath you did not realize you were holding. For the first time since nightfall, you sense the possibility of deeper rest. Not comfort in the modern sense, something humbler, something earned. Sound continues to shape your experience. The mast hums with a steady low note. Rope creaks gently as the ship adjusts to each passing swell. Somewhere near the bow, a man snores with surprising enthusiasm, his rough music blending with the murmur of waves. The combination is oddly soothing. You find yourself listening not for danger, but for continuity. As long as these sounds persist, the world remains in motion, the journey continues. You tuck your hands beneath the edge of the sail and feel how the thick fabric traps a pocket of shared warmth. The material smells faintly of salt and sun and distant summer voyages. It carries memories of brighter days, even as it shelters you from the cold. You imagine the countless nights this same cloth has endured, the countless weary bodies that have sought refuge beneath its folds. A deeper drowsiness gathers again, gentler now, as though the night has decided to grant you a small kindness. Your muscles loosen. The tension in your shoulders begins to fade. You allow your eyes to close without the usual hesitation. Trust grows slowly but steadily in this environment. Trust in the ship, trust in the crew, trust in your own ability to adapt. The stars continue their silent procession overhead. Their light filters through the narrow opening above you, tracing faint patterns across the sail. You watch those shifting shapes until they blur at the edges. The longship glides onward, its slender form cutting through dark water with tireless determination. Wrapped in wool and canvas and the quiet resilience of those around you, you drift toward another fragile pocket of sleep. The cold remains, the sea remains. Yet for this moment the night feels almost bearable, as though the art of making shelter from ordinary things has granted you a brief and precious peace. You wake to the sensation of movement that feels purposeful rather than accidental. The ship still rocks as it always has, yet there is a new pattern unfolding around you. A man rises quietly near the stern. Another shifts aside to make room. Someone else reaches for a cloak and drapes it with careful intention over a narrow stretch of deck. Even in the darkness, you sense that this is not random adjustment. It is something closer to silent agreement. You sit up slowly, drawing the edge of the sail away from your shoulders. The air bites again, yet the wind is less fierce than before. A pale hint of cloud glows somewhere beyond the mast, reflecting faint starlight back toward the sea. The longship glides onward with patient certainty. You notice now how sleeping places are not entirely equal. Some offer better shelter from spray, others lie closer to the centre where the motion feels gentler. Space on this vessel is shaped not only by necessity, but by rank. A widely acknowledged historical reality settles into your thoughts like a quiet observation spoken beside a fire. Viking society was strongly influenced by status and responsibility, and that hierarchy could extend even into daily routines at sea. Leaders and experienced sailors often occupied positions where they could respond quickly to danger, while younger crew members adapted to more exposed patches of deck. As you watch the subtle choreography unfolding around you, the idea feels less like theory and more like lived truth. A man with braided hair rests against a carved beam, his cloak wrapped in layered folds that suggest both experience and quiet authority. Others settle nearby, forming a loose protective ring that shields him from the worst of the wind. No words are exchanged, none are needed. You begin to understand how leadership can be expressed through arrangement as much as command. Even sleep carries echoes of responsibility. A curious and somewhat overlooked detail drifts into your awareness like a ripple spreading across still water. Some saga accounts hint that prized warriors occasionally slept with their weapons within easy reach, not only for defense but as symbols of identity and readiness. You glance toward the dim outline of a sword resting beside its owner, and feel how the presence of steel might offer a strange reassurance. Out here, danger can arrive without warning. Preparedness becomes a kind of comfort. Researchers continue to examine whether strict sleeping hierarchies were consistently enforced on Viking ships, or if arrangements shifted fluidly depending on weather fatigue and the dynamics of the crew. As you observe men exchanging positions with quiet nods, the latter possibility seems entirely plausible. Authority exists, yet it bends when survival requires cooperation. Tonight necessity appears to outweigh pride. You draw your knees closer and consider where you might fit within this living pattern. The space beside the folded sail still offers a measure of protection. Yet another narrow hollow has opened near the centre of the deck. The motion there feels smoother, less abrupt. You ease yourself into that place and notice how your body relaxes almost immediately. The difference is subtle but meaningful. Even a few inches can transform the quality of rest. Sound carries differently here. The groan of the hull feels more distant. The slap of water against the bow becomes a softened echo rather than a sharp interruption. You sense the longship breathing around you, its wooden frame absorbing the restless energy of the sea. For a moment you imagine that the vessel itself recognizes the need for balance, distributing comfort and discomfort in ways that keep its human cargo alive. Someone nearby shifts and offers you the corner of a fur without speaking. The gesture is small, yet profound. Warmth spreads slowly across your shoulder. You realize that rank may influence position, but kindness still moves freely through the night. Survival, after all, is a collective achievement. No one truly endures alone on this floating strip of timber. A deeper calm begins to gather within you. The stars wheel silently overhead. The wind loses some of its urgency. Your breathing falls into rhythm with the gentle rise and fall beneath your back. You feel as though you are learning a language older than words, a vocabulary of motion and stillness that guides the body toward rest. Your thoughts drift briefly to the distant shorelines that await this crew, to the halls where stories will be told about courage and hardship. Yet here in this moment, the greatest challenge is simply to sleep well enough to face another day. You close your eyes and let the subtle warmth of shared shelter carry you toward that fragile goal. The longship continues its quiet journey through darkness. Rank and duty shape the arrangement of bodies. Ingenuity shapes the use of every object. And within this delicate balance, you find yourself surrendering once more to the uncertain but necessary art of Viking rest. A dull ache in your toes pulls you awake before any sound or motion can claim the credit. It is a slow, creeping sensation, as though the cold has chosen its target with quiet patience. You remain still for a moment, testing whether warmth might return on its own. It does not. Instead, the numbness lingers, pressing gently at the edges of your awareness, until you finally sit up and draw your feet closer beneath the shelter of your cloak. The night feels different now. Not harsher, not calmer, simply deeper. The stars burn with a sharper clarity scattered across the sky like fragments of frozen light. The longship continues its steady path through dark water, its narrow form rising and falling, with a motion that has become strangely familiar. You begin to recognize how exhaustion could dull fear, turning once alarming sensations into part of the background of existence. An established historical understanding takes shape in your thoughts as you rub your hands together for warmth. In cold maritime climates, the human body loses heat most rapidly through extremities such as fingers, toes, and ears. Sailors throughout history have learned to protect these vulnerable points with layers, movement, and shared warmth whenever possible. You flex your stiff toes and feel faint pins of sensation return. It is not comfort, it is survival in miniature. Nearby, another crew member performs a similar ritual. He shifts his boots free from beneath a damp fold of sail and presses them briefly against his chest before pulling them back on. The gesture appears almost tender, as though he's coaxing life back into weary limbs. You realize that rest at sea is never entirely passive. It involves small acts of vigilance, tiny negotiations between body and environment that repeat themselves countless times through the night. A curious and lesser-known detail surfaces quietly in your mind. Some historians of experimental sailing have suggested that Viking crews may have practiced brief intervals of gentle movement during long nights, flexing muscles or stamping feet softly to keep circulation flowing without fully abandoning their sleeping places. The notion seems entirely plausible as you watch a man near the bow rise just long enough to shift his weight and then sink back down with a sigh. Debate continues among scholars regarding how often sailors truly achieved uninterrupted sleep during extended voyages in northern waters. Observing the pattern around you, you sense that rest here unfolds in fragments rather than hours. One person drifts into deeper slumber while another wakes to adjust a cloak. A third lies motionless yet clearly alert, listening for any change in wind or wave. The ship itself becomes a kind of breathing organism whose rhythm dictates the tempo of human fatigue. You draw your hands beneath your arms and tuck your chin toward your chest, forming a shape that traps warmth close to your core. The posture feels instinctive now, as though your body has accepted the logic of this environment. The wood beneath you still radiates chill, yet you are learning how to coexist with it rather than resist it. Acceptance, you realize, can be as powerful as insulation. Sound drifts across the deck in delicate layers. The faint whistle of wind through rigging, the soft thud of water against planking, the low murmur of voices from those who cannot quite surrender to sleep. Each noise seems to hold the meaning. Each contributes to the fragile sense that life continues steadily despite discomfort. You begin to find reassurance in this continuity, as though the ship itself is whispering that dawn will eventually arrive. You glance towards the horizon and see nothing but darkness merging with darker water. Yet you imagine the distant promise of land, fields and fires and stillness that does not sway beneath your feet. The thought warms you briefly before fading into the greater reality of the moment. Tonight belongs to the sea. Tonight belongs to endurance. Fatigue gathers again, heavier, but more familiar. Your toes still tingle faintly, a reminder of the cold that never fully releases its hold. Yet the warmth of nearby bodies, the shelter of wool and canvas, and the steady motion of the longship combine to create a strange and tentative peace. You lower yourself back onto the narrow space you have claimed and allow your eyes to close. As sleep returns in gentle, uneven waves, you sense that you are becoming part of the crew's unspoken rhythm. Waking, adjusting, resting, listening, trusting, enduring. The art of surviving a freezing night at sea is not taught through words. It is learned through repetition, through patience, through the quiet resilience that grows stronger with every passing hour. The longship moves onward beneath the silent constellations, carrying you deeper into darkness and deeper into understanding. Even numb fingers and aching toes cannot prevent the gradual surrender to rest. In this world, sleep is not a luxury. It is a skill, and you are beginning slowly but surely to master it. You drift awake again without urgency, as though your mind has grown used to returning from sleep in careful stages. The cold still clings to the air, yet something in the atmosphere feels steadier now. The sea has settled into a slower rhythm. Each rise and fall of the longship unfolds with patient certainty, like the measured breathing of a great creature at rest. For a moment you remain where you are listening. Night at sea is never silent. It speaks in small, persistent voices. Timber presses against timber with a low, thoughtful groan. Rope shifts gently in its bindings, producing a faint whisper that seems to travel from mast to stern. The water itself murmurs along the hull, brushing and retreating in a pattern that begins to feel almost companionable. You realize that sound has become a guide. It tells you when danger approaches and when the world is content to let you rest. An often cited historical observation emerges quietly in your thoughts. Longship construction allowed these vessels to flex with the motion of waves, creating a range of creaks and hums that sailors would have learned to interpret over time. Such noises were not always cause for alarm. Instead, they formed part of the constant dialogue between ship and sea. You lie still and let those sounds wash over you, noticing how familiarity gradually softens fear. Somewhere near the bow, a man turns in his sleep and knocks lightly against a shield. The brief metallic ring travels across the deck like a dropped coin in a silent hall. You tense instinctively, then relax, as nothing further occurs. Moments later, the ship answers with its own quiet music. A slow, resonant note vibrates through the planking beneath your back. You imagine the vessel speaking in its own language, assuring its human cargo that all remains well. A curious and slightly whimsical detail wanders into your awareness. Folklore collected in later centuries sometimes described sailors naming the particular sounds of their ships, treating each creak or groan as though it possessed character and intention. Whether Viking crews did this consistently remains uncertain, yet the idea feels fitting. On a night like this, companionship can be found even in the voice of wood and rope. Researchers still discuss how fully sailors trusted these auditory cues, or whether constant exposure simply dulled their sensitivity to danger. As you listen to the layered chorus around you, the answer seems complex. Some men sleep deeply, their breathing slow and even. Others lie motionless, but alert ears tuned to the slightest variation. Vigilance and fatigue share the deck like uneasy partners. You shift your position slightly and feel how the centre of the ship offers a smoother passage through the water. The difference is subtle but real. Your muscles respond with gratitude, easing their tension as the motion becomes more predictable. You tuck your cloak more securely around your shoulders and notice how the warmth of shared shelter continues to linger faint yet reassuring. The sky above has changed as well. Clouds have drifted apart, revealing a deeper field of stars. Their pale reflections shimmer across the dark sea like scattered lanterns. You watch the patterns for a while, feeling the quiet wonder that often arrives in moments of exhaustion. Out here, far from land, the universe feels both vast and strangely intimate. Every sound, every movement, every breath becomes part of a larger rhythm. A sailor nearby lets out a soft laugh in his sleep. The unexpected sound carries a hint of warmth, a reminder that dreams can flourish even in the harshest environments. You wonder what vision has visited him. Perhaps a feast hall alive with music, perhaps the steady comfort of earth beneath his feet. The thought lingers briefly before dissolving into the steady murmur of the night. Drowsiness returns, guided by the familiar lullaby of creaking planks and whispering waves. Your body has begun to trust this pattern. It recognizes the difference between harmless motion and sudden threat. You feel your breathing slow to match the cadence of the sea. The cold remains, yet it no longer dominates your thoughts. It has become simply another presence to acknowledge rather than resist. You lower your head against the rough wool of your cloak and close your eyes once more. Around you, the longship continues its tireless journey beneath the silent constellations. Sound wraps gently around your awareness, shaping the fragile boundary between waking and sleep. In this floating world, rest is measured not in hours, but in moments of calm that arrive like gifts. As the night deepens and the chorus of wood and water persists, you drift again toward that delicate balance, listening, trusting, allowing the steady voice of the ship to guide you into another stretch of uncertain yet necessary rest. You wake into a darkness that feels almost softer than before. The sea still moves beneath you, yet its rhythm has slowed into long, rolling breaths. The wind has eased as well, leaving only a cool whisper that slips across your cheeks and disappears again. For a moment you lie still and simply notice how different the night feels. Not kind exactly, but less determined to challenge you. A faint glow appears near the stern where someone has uncovered a small covered lantern for just a few minutes. Its light is careful and subdued, shielded from the open sea. The warm colour spreads across nearby faces and blankets like a fragile promise. You realise how powerful even the smallest hint of warmth can be in a world shaped by cold and darkness. A broadly accepted historical fact settles into your awareness as you watch a sailor lift a wooden cup toward his lips. Warm drinks, often simple broths or heated water flavoured with herbs, were valued on long voyages because they helped restore body heat and morale. You imagine the comfort of swallowing something warm in this environment. The idea feels almost luxurious. The man passes the cup quietly to another, and then the lantern is covered once more, returning the deck to shadow. You adjust your cloak and feel how the earlier dampness has begun to dry in the steady night air. The wool no longer clings with the same heavy chill. Instead, it forms a softer barrier between you and the lingering cold. You draw your knees inward and notice how hunger stirs faintly in your stomach. The long hours since the last meal have not gone unnoticed by your body. A curious and slightly unexpected tidbit drifts into your thoughts like steam rising from an unseen pot. Some reconstructions of Viking voyages suggest that crews occasionally kept small supplies of preserved fat or dried meat within reach during night watches, allowing them to consume quick bites that provided energy and warmth. You imagine the taste, salty, rich, sustaining, the kind of simple nourishment that turns endurance into possibility. Scholars still debate how consistently such nighttime eating habits were practiced, or whether they depended largely on the nature of the journey and the availability of provisions. As you observe a man unwrap a small bundle and chew thoughtfully before settling again, the theory seems grounded in practical sense. Food becomes another tool, another way to negotiate with the cold. The sounds of the ship remain your constant companion. A low hum travels through the mast like a distant voice. The hull answers with slow creaks that seem almost conversational. You begin to sense that these noises no longer disturb your rest. Instead, they reassure you. They signal continuity, movement, life. You glance upward and see the stars shifting gradually toward the western horizon. Time is passing, though it feels suspended in this endless night. The longship glides onward with tireless purpose. Its slender form cuts through the dark water as though guided by memory rather than sight. You feel a quiet respect for the knowledge that allows sailors to navigate such vast, uncertain spaces. Fatigue settles over you again, heavier yet more familiar. Your muscles no longer resist the need for rest. They accept it with a kind of grateful resignation. You lower your head against a folded cloak and notice how warmth lingers faintly where others have slept before you. The shared use of space becomes a subtle form of cooperation. Each body leaves behind traces of comfort for the next. The air smells faintly of wool and salt and the lingering warmth of that brief hidden lantern. It creates an atmosphere that feels almost intimate despite the open sky above. You realize that survival at sea is not only about strength or skill, it is also about the small gestures that sustain morale. A cup passed from hand to hand, a scrap of food shared without ceremony, a quiet word offered in the dark. Your eyes grow heavy once more. The gentle rocking of the vessel becomes a cradle rather than a threat. You listen to the breathing around you, to the endless sure murmur of water brushing wood, and allow yourself to drift towards sleep again. The cold remains, yet it has lost some of its authority. Warmth, however fleeting, has shown that endurance can be shaped by simple choices. As you surrender once more to the uncertain art of resting on a freezing ocean night, the longship continues its silent journey beneath the fading stars, carrying you and your companions toward whatever dawn may bring. You wake again into a darkness that feels almost companionable now. The cold still presses against your cloak. The sea still rocks beneath you with steady insistence. Yet something in your awareness has shifted. You no longer greet each sensation with surprise. Instead, you notice it, accept it, and quietly adapt. This, you realize, is how long nights at sea reshape the human mind. Around you, the arrangement of bodies has changed once more. Someone has drawn closer during the last stretch of sleep, and now your shoulder rests lightly against his. The contact is accidental. It is also essential. Warmth spreads slowly through the layers of wool, a faint but welcome reassurance that you are not alone on this narrow floating world. A well-documented historical pattern emerges in your thoughts as you remain still, careful not to disturb the fragile comfort you have found. Life aboard Viking ships demanded cooperation in countless subtle ways. Crews shared space labour, and often the simple necessity of physical closeness, in order to conserve heat and energy during long journeys. You feel how this shared existence transforms sleep from a private act into a collective strategy. The man beside you exhales in a slow, steady rhythm. His breath forms a pale cloud that drifts briefly in the cold air before fading. You find yourself matching his cadence without thinking. Inhale, exhale. The synchronization feels oddly calming. It reminds you that survival at sea depends as much on trust as on skill. Each person becomes part of a living system that must function smoothly through exhaustion and discomfort. A curious and slightly charming detail surfaces in your mind like a memory borrowed from another age. Some later Scandinavian traditions describe groups of travellers sharing songs or murmured stories before rest, creating a sense of unity that lingered even after sleep arrived. Whether Viking crews practice similar rituals consistently remains uncertain, yet you imagine how a quiet exchange of voices might have eased the tension of these exposed nights. Researchers continue to explore how sailors balance the need for vigilance with the human requirement for rest. As you observe the deck, you notice that someone always seems to remain half awake. A figure sits upright nearer the bow, scanning the invisible horizon. Another shifts, occasionally adjusting a cloak or checking the position of gear. These small acts of awareness form an unspoken watch that allows others to drift more deeply into slumber. The longship itself feels different now, as though it has accepted your presence. Its movements no longer jar your senses. Instead, they guide your breathing and shape your posture. You lie with one arm tucked beneath your head and the other resting against the warmth beside you. The wood beneath your back feels less hostile. Perhaps it has warmed slightly from the bodies that have rested there through the night. Sound continues to weave its quiet tapestry around you. The low murmur of waves, the soft creak of planking, the faint rustle of fur as someone turns in sleep. These details create a rhythm that feels almost protective. You realize that true silence might be more unsettling than this constant gentle noise. The ship speaks, the sea answers. Together they create an environment in which rest can survive. Your thoughts wander briefly toward distant homes and familiar comforts. Fires that do not sway, beds that do not chill the bones, yet the longing fades quickly. You sense that this experience is teaching you something valuable about resilience. Humans are capable of adapting to remarkable circumstances when necessity demands it. Warmth can be found in proximity. Shelter can be fashioned from cooperation. A deeper drowsiness gathers again, shaped by the steady breathing of those around you. You allow your eyes to close without resistance. The shared heat at your side becomes an anchor, holding you gently in place as the ship continues its tireless passage across dark water. You feel as though you are floating within a larger living organism, each person contributing to the survival of the whole. The stars above have begun their slow descent toward the horizon. Time moves forward even when the night feels endless. The longship glides onward beneath their fading light, carrying you deeper into the quiet mystery of the sea. You surrender once more to the fragile comfort of collective rest, trusting that shared strength will see you through the remaining hours. Wrapped in wool and breath and the subtle reassurance of human presence, you drift towards sleep again. The cold still lingers. The darkness still surrounds you. Yet within this narrow world of timber and sail, you have discovered that survival is often built upon the simplest of connections. You wake this time not because of cold or discomfort, but because the sea itself has changed its mood. The longship lifts more sharply beneath you, rising and dropping, with a force that demands attention. The motion is still controlled, still measured, yet it carries a new urgency. The sky above has darkened with thicker clouds that blur the stars into pale smudges of light. You sense instinctively that this stretch of night will be different. A gust of wind sweeps across the deck and rattles the rigging like distant thunder. Cloaks snap softly against planking. Someone rises near the mast and steadies himself with practiced ease. You follow his movement with your eyes, noticing how alertness spreads quietly from one sleeper to the next. No one shouts, no one panics, yet rest becomes shallower, more cautious. The art of sleeping at sea must now share space with readiness. A firmly grounded historical understanding comes to mind as you brace one hand against the deck. Storms and sudden shifts in weather were constant companions for Viking sailors who relied on skill and endurance rather than enclosed shelter to survive such nights. Their vessels were swift and resilient, but they offered little protection from wind-driven spray or abrupt changes in motion. You feel the truth of that reality in your bones as another wave lifts the ship with deliberate force. A curious and somewhat dramatic detail drifts into your awareness like a fragment of saga memory. Some accounts describe sailors tying themselves loosely to fix points during rough conditions, not to restrict movement entirely, but to reduce the risk of being thrown across the deck while exhausted. Whether this practice was common in every crew remains uncertain, yet the logic feels undeniable, as you watch a man secure a loop of rope around his wrist before settling again into a guarded posture. Specialists in maritime history continue to explore how crews balance the need for sleep with the demands of storm watch during perilous crossings. As the wind strengthens and the hull answers with deeper groans, you begin to sense that true rest will be scarce for a while. Bodies lie down but do not fully relax. Eyes close but remain ready to open at the slightest change. This is not the gentle drifting of earlier hours. It is endurance shaped by vigilance. Spray sweeps across the deck in sudden bursts, cold as melted ice. You pull your cloak tighter and tuck your chin toward your chest, forming a compact shape that resists the force of the wind. Nearby, someone drags a folded sail into a higher ridge, creating a low windbreak that offers partial shelter to those who can reach it. The gesture is swift and cooperative. Survival here depends on shared effort rather than individual comfort. The longship moves with a new intensity now, its slender form slicing through dark water with determined grace. Each rise feels higher, each descent feels deeper, yet the vessel holds. Its flexible planks absorb the strain, bending slightly and then returning to shape. You find yourself trusting this craftsmanship even as fear flickers at the edges of your thoughts. Sound becomes shallower, more insistent. Rope hums under tension. Water slaps the hull with sudden force. Voices murmur brief instructions that vanish almost as quickly as they appear. You realize that sleep in moments like this transforms into something closer to watchful stillness. Rest is measured in breaths rather than minutes, in brief intervals when the sea allows you to loosen your grip on awareness. Fatigue presses heavily against your eyelids. Your body longs to surrender, yet instinct keeps you alert. You close your eyes for a moment and feel the ship surge forward beneath you. Then you open them again, reassured by the presence of others who share this uneasy balance between exhaustion and readiness. Together you form a quiet network of endurance stretched across the deck. The clouds shift slowly overhead, revealing a scatter of stars once more. Their pale light offers no warmth, yet it restores a sense of orientation. You realize that even in the harshest stretches of night there are signs that the world continues to turn. Wind rises and falls, waves gather and disperse. Human resilience persists. Gradually the motion softens, the gusts lose their sharp edge. The longship settles back into its earlier rhythm as though the sea has decided that enough has been tested for now. You feel your muscles release a tension you had not fully acknowledged. Weariness floods in to fill the space left behind. You lower yourself once more onto the narrow patch of deck you have come to know so well. The wood is cold, the air is damp, yet relief spreads quietly through your thoughts. Another challenge has been endured. Another lesson has been learned about the fragile art of resting in a world that refuses to stay still. As you draw your cloak close and allow your breathing to slow, the longship glides onward, beneath a sky that is beginning almost imperceptibly to lighten. Sleep returns in cautious, gentle waves, carrying you through the final hours of this restless, frozen night. You do not wake suddenly this time. Instead, you surface slowly from sleep like a diver, rising through dark water toward a distant shimmer of light. The storm has passed. The sea beneath you still moves, yet its rhythm feels broader, now less urgent. The wind brushes your face with a cool steadiness that almost resembles calm. You lie still and notice how exhaustion lingers in every muscle, not sharp or painful, just heavy and persistent. The horizon remains invisible, swallowed by night, but something in the air has changed. It carries a faint dryness, a subtle promise that the worst discomfort has already come and gone. Around you, the crew breathes more deeply than before. Bodies stretch slightly in sleep. Cloaks loosen where they had been wrapped tight against the gale. You sense that this stretch of darkness will test endurance in a quieter way. A widely accepted historical insight forms gently in your thoughts. Long sea voyages often strained both the body and the mind, especially when land remained out of sight for days or even weeks. Sailors throughout history have described a creeping weariness that went beyond physical fatigue. It settled into thoughts and emotions shaping the way night felt and how sleep arrived. You begin to understand this sensation now. Rest comes, but it never feels entirely complete. The longship glides forward with patient determination. Its curved hull cuts through the dark water as though guided by memory rather than vision. You watch the faint ripple along its side and imagine the endless distance already travelled. Somewhere behind you lie familiar shores. Somewhere ahead wait destinations that exist only in hope. Between them stretches this quiet, uncertain present. A curious and almost poetic detail drifts into your awareness. Some later accounts of seafaring speak of sailors naming the subtle moods of the ocean, recognizing certain patterns of swell or wind as signs of approaching change. Whether Viking crews use similar language remains uncertain, yet you sense how easily such habits might arise. When night surrounds you on every side, even small variations in movement can feel significant. Debate continues among maritime historians regarding how prolonged exposure to cold and monotony affected decision-making and morale during Viking expeditions. As you observe the still forms around you, the question seems deeply relevant. A man shifts and murmurs in his sleep. Another stares upward with open eyes, his expression thoughtful rather than afraid. Fatigue can dull fear. It can also sharpen reflection. You pull your cloak more closely around your shoulders and feel how your body responds with a mixture of gratitude and reluctance. Warmth gathers slowly as though it must be persuaded to remain. Your hands ache faintly when you flex them. Your back protests when you change position. Yet none of this feels surprising anymore. The night has taught you what to expect. Endurance has become routine. Sound returns in gentle layers. The murmur of waves brushing the hull. The soft creak of planks adjusting to motion. The occasional sigh of wind passing through rigging. These noises form a kind of background music that guides your thoughts. You begin to notice how easily your breathing falls into step with the rise and fall of the ship. The sensation is almost hypnotic. You wonder briefly how many voyages like this have unfolded across these waters. How many tired souls have closed their eyes beneath the same indifferent stars, trusting that resilience would carry them through until morning. The thought brings a quiet sense of connection, as though you are sharing an experience that stretches far beyond this single night. Fatigue presses gently at the edges of your awareness. Not overwhelming, not harsh, just competent. You allow your head to rest against a folded bundle and feel the rough texture of a wool beneath your cheek. The scent of salt and damp leather lingers in the air. It has become strangely familiar, almost comforting in its persistence. The sky begins to shift ever so slightly. A faint paling touches the far edge of darkness, barely noticeable unless you are looking for it. You realize that dawn is preparing its quiet return. The knowledge carries a subtle lift of spirit. Another night is nearly behind you. Another lesson in survival has been learned without fanfare. You close your eyes once more, not because sleep demands it, but because rest still offers value in these final hours. The longship continues its tireless journey, bearing you across cold water toward whatever day may bring. Within this floating world of timber and breath, you find yourself surrendering again to the slow, steady rhythm of endurance. Wrapped in shared warmth and quiet determination, you drift into another fragile stretch of sleep, trusting that even the longest frozen night must eventually yield to light. You wake into a night that feels almost sacred in its stillness. The sea has softened to long, quiet swells that lift the ship as though it were part of the water itself. Above you, the sky stretches wide and clear, the stars shining with a brightness that seems close enough to touch. For a few slow breaths, you forget the cold entirely. You simply lie there and watch the heavens move. The air carries a sharp, clean scent that reminds you of winter forests and distant snowfields. Your cloak rustles faintly as you shift. The wood beneath you remains firm and unyielding, yet your body has learned how to settle into its narrow contours. The longship glides forward with patient grace, its passage marked only by the gentle ripple of dark water parting at the hull. A well-established historical reality comes quietly into your thoughts. For Viking sailors, belief and ritual often formed an invisible layer of protection during uncertain journeys. Offerings to gods or whispered invocations to sea spirits were part of a cultural framework that gave meaning to hardship. You imagine how a simple murmur of faith might steady trembling hands when storms gathered or darkness felt endless. Nearby, a man stirs and raises his face toward the sky. His lips move in a soft rhythm you cannot fully hear. Perhaps he's praying. Perhaps he's simply remembering home. The gesture carries a quiet dignity that resonates through the deck like a ripple spreading across still water. Others remain asleep, yet the atmosphere itself seems altered by that small act of devotion. A curious and somewhat enchanting detail drifts through your mind like starlight crossing the sea. Some later Scandinavian traditions describe travellers tracing protective symbols in the air or on wooden surfaces before rest gestures believed to guard against misfortune. Whether Viking crews practice such customs consistently remains uncertain, yet the idea feels entirely at home in this vast exposed night. Scholars continue to explore how spiritual belief influenced morale and endurance during long maritime expeditions. As you lie beneath the cold brilliance of the constellations, the question feels deeply relevant. Faith does not change the wind or warm the deck, yet it can shape the way a person meets discomfort. It can transform fear into acceptance. It can lend courage to weary hearts. You pull your cloak tighter and feel how the shared warmth of nearby bodies still lingers, faint but reassuring. The rhythm of breathing around you forms a gentle counterpoint to the murmur of waves. Together they create a kind of living chorus that seems to affirm the simple truth of survival. You are still here. The ship is still moving. The night is still unfolding. The stars above shift slowly, tracing arcs that mark the passage of time more reliably than any spoken measure. You watch their silent procession and sense how ancient sailors might have found guidance in these patterns. Navigation and belief intertwine in ways that modern minds often forget. The sky becomes both map and companion. Fatigue rests heavily on your shoulders, yet it no longer feels like an enemy. Instead, it resembles a cloak of its own, settling around you with quiet insistence. You close your eyes for a moment and listen to the low hum of rigging, the distant splash of water against wood. Each sound reassures you that the longship continues its purposeful journey through darkness. When you open your eyes again, the world appears unchanged, yet you feel subtly transformed. Hardship has revealed unexpected layers of resilience within you. Cold has taught you patience, motion has taught you balance. Even the vast indifferent sea has become a teacher in its own right. You allow your head to rest once more against the rough weave of wool and feel your breathing slow to match the gentle rise and fall beneath your back. Somewhere in the distance, an unseen bird cries out briefly, its voice carrying across the water like a fragment of dream. Then silence returns deeper than before. Gradually sleep gathers at the edges of your awareness, guided by the calm certainty of this starlit stretch of night. You surrender to it without resistance, trusting that belief, companionship, and the stubborn strength of human adaptation will carry you through until dawn. The longship moves onward beneath the watchful constellations, its slender form a testament to endurance and quiet faith. Wrapped in darkness and shared warmth, you drift again into rest, knowing that each moment of sleep brings you closer to the promise of morning. You wake to a sky that looks almost unfamiliar. The stars remain, yet their brightness has softened, as though a thin veil has been drawn across the heavens. A faint band of pale light lingers along the far horizon, subtle enough that you might have missed it earlier. The night is changing. The sea beneath you feels calmer too, rolling in long measured swells that no longer jolt your senses. You lie still and let this quiet shift unfold. Your body feels heavy with fatigue, yet also strangely accustomed to its surroundings. The cold still presses against your cloak, but it has lost some of its power to surprise you. You draw a slow breath and taste the briny air. It feels sharper now, almost invigorating, as if the promise of morning has begun to stir the world from its frozen stillness. A broadly recognised historical understanding forms gently in your thoughts. Viking voyages were shaped profoundly by the rhythms of northern seasons. During summer months, long hours of daylight reduced the time available for deep rest, while winter journeys often brought the extended darkness that challenged both morale and routine. You imagine the crew navigating not only waves and wind, but also the shifting patterns of light that governed their sense of time. Nearby, a sailor rolls onto his back and gazes upward, blinking at the paling sky. His expression carries a mixture of relief and weariness. Others remain curled beneath layers of wool, reluctant to abandon the fragile comfort they have managed to create. You sense that sleep at sea is never simply about closing one's eyes. It is about choosing the right moment to release tension, the right posture to conserve warmth, the right acceptance of what cannot be controlled. A curious and almost poetic detail drifts into your awareness, like mist rising from cold water. Some historians of northern travel have suggested that sailors learned to measure the passing of the night by subtle changes in starlight and horizon glow, developing an intuitive sense of approaching dawn long before it became visible to the untrained eye. Whether Viking crews relied consistently on such perception remains uncertain, yet the idea feels plausible as you watch the sky gradually transform. Scholarly discussion continues regarding how seasonal light cycles influence sleeping habits during extended expeditions. Did crews attempt to maintain structured routines, or did they adapt fluidly to the environment around them? Observing the quiet movements on the deck, you suspect the latter. A man sits upright and stretches his arms before settling again. Another adjusts his cloak to catch a hint of warmth from the first faint glow of morning. The longship glides forward with tireless grace. Its planks creak softly in response to the steady motion of the sea. You begin to recognize how the vessel itself seems to participate in the transition from night to day, its silhouette growing more defined against the brightening horizon. The change feels gradual yet profound, like waking from a dream that never quite ends. You shift your position and feel stiffness along your back and shoulders. The deck remains unyielding, yet your body has learned to accommodate its contours. You tuck your hands beneath your arms once more, and notice how warmth gathers more easily now. Perhaps the air itself has softened. Perhaps endurance has reshaped your perception. Either way, the night no longer feels endless. Sound evolves as well. The murmur of waves carries a lighter tone. A faint call of distant seabirds drifts across the water, hinting at unseen shores, or simply the restless life of the open sea. You listen carefully, sensing how each new note adds depth to the experience of waking. The ship continues its journey, guided by knowledge older than memory. Fatigue still lingers, yet hope begins to mingle with it. You watch the horizon brighten by imperceptible degrees, and realize that another frozen night has nearly passed. The crew around you stirs more frequently now. Cloaks loosen, limbs stretch, eyes open to greet the fragile promise of daylight. You lower your head briefly and close your eyes one last time, savoring the final moments of shared warmth and cautious rest. The longship rocks gently beneath you, its motion no longer unsettling but almost comforting. You feel as though you have crossed an invisible threshold, moving from endurance toward renewal. When you open your eyes again, the sky has lightened further, revealing a faint wash of colour that spreads across the edge of the world. The sea reflects this subtle transformation like a mirror stirred by breath. You sense that morning is drawing nearer with each passing moment. Wrapped in wool and quiet resilience, you allow yourself to drift into one last shallow stretch of sleep before the day begins, trusting that the knowledge gained through darkness will remain with you long after the sun has risen. You wake into a softer kind of darkness that feels almost like the memory of night rather than its full presence. The horizon now carries a faint diluted glow, neither silver nor gold, just enough to separate sea from sky. The longship continues its steady forward glide, the motion beneath you smooth and familiar. Your body responds with a slow stretch that feels cautious yet hopeful. Another frozen night is beginning to loosen its grip. Around you the crew is stirring with quiet intention. Cloaks are adjusted. Boots are nudged into place. Someone sits upright and peers ahead as though searching for a sign that land might be nearer than it seems. The air smells sharper now, touched by the freshness that often comes just before dawn. You draw a deeper breath and feel how fatigue still lingers in your muscles, yet it is threaded with a faint anticipation. A firmly grounded historical fact drifts into your thoughts as you observe the deck around you. Viking voyages were rarely undertaken for a single purpose. The same ship might carry traders one season, raiders another, and settlers on a different journey entirely. Each mission shaped the rhythm of life aboard. Sleep itself became a flexible skill adapting to the urgency of conflict or the slower pace of commerce. You imagine how the night just past might have felt different if cargo rather than survival had been the crew's primary concern. A curious and slightly vivid detail wanders into your awareness like a fragment of distant storytelling. Some reconstructed accounts of Viking expeditions describe crews tying bundles of goods along the sides of the ship, not only to secure them, but to create subtle wind buffers that altered sleeping arrangements. Whether this was common practice remains uncertain, yet the notion feels believable as you notice how provisions stacked near the bow have provided a sheltered hollow through the night. Specialists continue to explore how the nature of each voyage influenced rest patterns at sea. A raiding expedition might demand heightened alertness and shorter intervals of sleep, while a trading journey could allow for longer stretches of shared recovery. As you watch a man carefully check a crate before settling again, you sense how responsibility shapes fatigue. In half-light duty does not release its whole. The sky grows gradually brighter. Faint streaks of pale colour spread across the horizon like the first brushstrokes of a painting. The sea reflects these subtle tones, transforming from black to deep blue, with a softness that feels almost gentle. You realise that the changing light alters not only what you see, but how you feel. Hope moves quietly through your thoughts, warming them more effectively than any cloak. Sound shifts with the coming dawn. The low murmur of waves becomes clearer, less muffled by darkness. A distant cry of seabirds echoes across the water, sharp and alive. You listen with renewed curiosity, sensing how the world beyond the ship is beginning to awaken. Even the creak of planking seems lighter now, as though the vessel itself is relieved to leave the deepest hours behind. You adjust your posture and feel stiffness along your back and shoulders. The memory of cold lingers in your bones, yet it no longer dominates your awareness. Experience has taught you how to fold discomfort into the background, allowing focus to settle on what lies ahead. The longship continues its tireless passage, guided by skill and stubborn determination. Researchers still discuss whether crews measure distance travelled during night voyages primarily by instinct or by subtle environmental cues such as wind direction and watercolour. As you gaze toward the brightening horizon, you sense how such knowledge might accumulate through countless journeys. The sea becomes a map written in motion and sound, legible only to those who learn its language. Fatigue remains, yet it carries a different quality now. It feels like the echo of effort rather than an ongoing burden. You draw your cloak closer and notice how warmth gathers more easily with the first hints of daylight. Around you, men begin to stretch and exchange quiet glances that speak of shared endurance. The night has been long. The lessons it offered will linger. You lower yourself once more against the deck, allowing your eyes to close briefly as the sky continues its transformation. The gentle rocking beneath you feels almost soothing. Now a reminder that rest can exist even in the midst of motion. Wrapped in wool breath and the promise of morning, you drift into one final, shallow sleep. The longship glides onward toward new horizons, carrying you from darkness into the uncertain clarity of day. In this quiet transition, you sense how each voyage reshapes the meaning of sleep, turning necessity into skill and hardship into memory. You wake to a sky that is no longer fully night, yet not quite morning. A muted wash of grey-blue stretches across the horizon, blending gently into the darker sea below. The longship continues its patient glide through the water, its shape becoming clearer with each passing moment. You lie still, for a while aware of the deep tiredness in your limbs, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from having endured another stretch of cold darkness. Around you the crew moves with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Some sit upright, rubbing stiffness from their shoulders. Others remain curled beneath cloaks, clinging to the last fragments of warmth. The air smells different now, less sharp, carrying a faint dryness that suggests the sun will soon rise. You feel your breath settle into an easier pattern, no longer forced by the biting chill of the deepest night. A broadly supported historical observation forms in your thoughts as you glance along the length of the vessel. Archaeological discoveries from preserved ship burials and fragments of maritime equipment reveal how carefully Viking longships were constructed to balance speed with flexibility. Their overlapping planks, curved hulls and shallow drafts allowed them to cross open sea and enter narrow rivers alike. You run your fingers across the rough wood beside you and sense the quiet genius in that design. This ship is not only transport, it is shelter of a subtle and ingenious kind. You notice how sleeping places have shifted again with the changing light. Those who rested in sheltered hollows now move toward open stretches of deck to stretch their limbs. Bundles of fur are shaken out and draped across rails to dry. The simple act of rearranging space feels almost ceremonial, marking the transition from night survival to daytime preparation. You begin to understand how routines like this could anchor a crew's sense of continuity during long, uncertain voyages. A curious detail from experimental archaeology drifts through your awareness like a faint memory. Some reconstructed journeys have suggested that even the shape of rowing benches might have influenced how sailors rested, offering narrow ridges that supported the body in ways modern furniture does not. Whether this was intentional or simply an accidental benefit remains uncertain. Yet as you observe a man leaning comfortably against such a bench, the possibility feels entirely plausible. Researchers continue to examine how much of Viking daily life at sea can truly be reconstructed from material evidence alone. Wood decays, textiles vanish, only fragments endure. You sense the challenge in piecing together a full picture of how sleep unfolded on nights like the one you have just experienced. Much must be imagined through empathy and careful study. Much must remain open to interpretation. The sky brightens further, revealing faint streaks of pale gold that ripple across the water's surface. The longship responds with a subtle change in mood. Its creaks sound lighter. Its motion feels less mysterious now that the surrounding world begins to take shape. You stretch your arms carefully and feel a welcome warmth spreading through your stiff muscles. Sound grows richer as morning approaches. The murmur of waves becomes clearer, accompanied by the distant calls of seabirds gliding somewhere beyond sight. A low exchange of voices rises among the crew, their tones calm and practical. The shared hardship of the night has forged a quiet bond that does not require explanation. You pull your cloak more loosely around your shoulders and notice how the first hints of sunlight begin to touch its rough fibres. The fabric no longer feels like a desperate shield against cold. Instead, it becomes simply another tool, part of the ongoing rhythm of travel and rest. You sense that your perception of comfort has shifted. What once seemed harsh now feels almost familiar. Fatigue lingers, yet it carries a softer edge. It is the tiredness that follows effort rather than the exhaustion of fear. You allow your eyes to close briefly once more, savouring the gentle rocking beneath your back. The longship glides onward, its journey far from complete, yet its purpose clear in every creak and whisper. As you drift through this final fragile pocket of rest, you realize that the night has taught you more than endurance. It has revealed the delicate balance between human vulnerability and human ingenuity. In the narrow shelter of curved planks and shared warmth, sleep has become both challenge and triumph. When you open your eyes again, the world is brighter still. The sea stretches outward in muted shades of blue and silver. The promise of day stands just beyond the horizon. Wrapped in quiet resilience, you prepare to rise with the crew and face whatever the journey will demand next. You wake into a world that is almost morning, yet still touched by the final breath of night. The horizon glows with a pale, spreading light that softens the edges of sea and sky. The longship moves steadily through water that now reflects faint shades of blue and silver. For a moment, you remain where you are, feeling the gentle sway beneath your back and the lingering heaviness in your limbs. Another frozen night has passed, and with it a layer of uncertainty you once carried. Around you, the crew begins to shift with quiet purpose. Cloaks are folded, bundles of fur are shaken and draped where they can catch the first weak warmth of the rising sun. The deck feels more alive now, not because the cold has vanished, but because the human response to it has changed. Survival has given way to preparation. Rest has given way to movement. A commonly accepted historical understanding settles into your thoughts like a voice speaking from across centuries. Popular images of Viking life often emphasize drama and spectacle, yet the reality of daily endurance at sea was shaped by routine adaptation and practical skill. Nights like the one you have just experienced were not heroic tableaux. They were quiet tests of resilience repeated countless times by ordinary people. You sit up and notice how the ship's details emerge more clearly in the growing light. The carved prow catches a faint glimmer. The overlapping planks reveal subtle patterns of grain and wear. Even the ropes seem to stretch and breathe as they respond to the shifting motion of the sea. The vessel no longer feels mysterious. It feels familiar, almost companionable. A curious and slightly amusing detail drifts into your awareness as you watch a sailor straighten his cloak with exaggerated care. Later myths would imagine Viking warriors wearing horned helmets, a notion that has little basis in historical evidence. Real seafarers favoured practical headgear, or simple hoods that could shield against wind and spray. The contrast between myth and reality feels especially vivid now that you have shared their nightly struggle for warmth. Scholars continue to explore how storytelling and later artistic interpretations shaped modern perceptions of Viking life. As you glance along the deck at men stretching tired limbs and exchanging brief smiles, you sense how easily hardship can be transformed into legend. The truth often lies in quieter moments, in the slow rise from sleep, in the careful folding of blankets, in the shared understanding that survival itself is worthy of remembrance. The sea reflects the brightening sky with increasing clarity. Small ripples of light dance across the surface like scattered coins. The longship glides forward with renewed confidence, its path guided by knowledge that has been passed from generation to generation. You feel a growing sense of connection to this journey, as though the night has granted you a glimpse into a world both distant and deeply human. Sound evolves with the coming day. The creak of planks blends with the low murmur of conversation. Seabirds call more frequently, now their voices sharp and lively. Even the splash of water against the hull seems less threatening, more like a greeting than a warning. You draw a deeper breath and feel how the air itself carries the promise of warmth. Fatigue remains in your muscles, yet it is accompanied by a quiet pride. You have endured cold motion and uncertainty. You have learned how to fold yourself into narrow spaces and find rest where none seemed possible. The experience has reshaped your understanding of comfort and resilience. What once appeared harsh now feels like part of a larger story. You adjust your cloak and stand slowly steadying yourself as the deck tilts beneath your feet. The horizon grows brighter with each passing moment. A faint golden edge begins to appear, signaling the imminent arrival of the sun. Round you, the crew moves with renewed energy, preparing for the tasks that daylight will bring. Before rising fully, you allow yourself one last glance at the place where you have spent the night. The rough planks, the folded sail, the scattered bundles of fur. Each object carries the memory of shared endurance. Each has played a role in transforming freezing darkness into something survivable. As the longship continues its tireless journey across the waking sea, you feel a quiet gratitude for the lessons learned beneath the stars. The myths may linger in distant tales, but the truth of Viking sleep lies here in the simple, stubborn art of adapting to whatever the ocean demands. You wake into a sky that is no longer uncertain. Dawn has finally begun to claim its place above the horizon. A soft, pale light spreads across the sea like breath on glass, revealing shapes and colours that were hidden through the long hours of darkness. The longship continues its steady passage now, outlined clearly against the gently brightening water. For a moment you remain where you are, savouring the fragile stillness that comes just before the day fully arrives. Your body feels heavy with the memory of cold. Every joint seems aware of the night that has passed. Yet alongside the stiffness there is also relief. The air carries a faint promise of warmth. The wind has softened into something almost kind. You draw a deeper breath and taste salt and possibility in equal measure. A well-grounded historical fact settles into your awareness as you watch the first golden tones begin to touch the horizon. Viking crews often rose early during voyages, using the return of daylight to adjust course, prepare equipment, and restore a sense of order after the unpredictable hours of night. Sleep when it came at sea was never an isolated event. It was part of a continuous cycle of endurance and readiness shaped by the demands of travel. Around you, men begin to sit upright and stretch their arms toward the paling skier. Cloaks are loosened. Blankets are folded. The deck slowly transforms from a patchwork of resting shapes into a place of purposeful movement. You sense how the transition from darkness to light brings not only physical relief, but also a renewal of spirit. The longship feels different now, less like a refuge and more like a vessel of intent. A curious and slightly unexpected detail drifts through your thoughts as you watch a sailor rub his hands briskly together before reaching for an oar. Some historical interpretations suggest that brief bursts of rowing at dawn could help restore circulation after a cold night, warming the body through exertion, while also maintaining the ship's progress. Whether this was a formal practice or simply a practical response to discomfort remains uncertain. Yet the logic feels sound as you imagine tired muscles coming back to life through motion. Historians continue to discuss how quickly crews recovered from sleepless or fragmented nights during long crossings. Observing the quiet efficiency around you, you begin to suspect that resilience was as much mental as physical. Fatigue did not disappear with the rising sun. It was simply folded into the tasks of the day, becoming another element to be managed rather than feared. The sea itself appears transformed in this new light. Gentle ripples catch the glow of dawn and scatter it across the surface like fragments of broken glass. The longship rides these shifting reflections with graceful assurance. You realize that the vessel, which seemed so fragile in darkness, now reveals its strength in clarity. Every plank, every rope, every carved detail stands as evidence of careful craftsmanship. Sound grows livelier with each passing moment. Seabirds wheel overhead, their calls sharp and energetic. The creak of rigging blends with the splash of oars dipping into water. Low voices exchange brief instructions that carry a note of quiet confidence. The night has tested this crew, yet it has also prepared them for the work ahead. You push yourself slowly to your feet and feel the deck tilt beneath you in a familiar, reassuring way. Your muscles protest at first, then adjust. Warmth begins to spread through your limbs as you move. The memory of freezing stillness fades into the background, replaced by the steady rhythm of purposeful action. For a moment, you glance back at the place where you slept. The rough planks still hold the faint imprint of shared warmth. A folded sail rests nearby like a silent witness to the night's endurance. You sense that these small details will linger in your memory long after the voyage is complete. The horizon brightens further, revealing a thin band of gold that stretches across the edge of the world. The promise of sunlight feels almost tangible now. Around you, the crew works with quiet determination, their movements shaped by habit and experience. Each task performed at dawn carries the unspoken understanding that survival depends on readiness. As the longship glides onward through the awakening sea, you feel a renewed sense of energy stirring within you. Another frozen night has been faced and endured. Another lesson has been added to your growing knowledge of what it means to rest in a place without shelter. You take one final breath of the cool morning air and allow your thoughts to settle into calm anticipation. The day is beginning, the journey continues, and the fragile art of sleep at sea has revealed itself as both necessity and quiet triumph. You wake into a calm that feels almost unreal after the long, uncertain hours of darkness. The sea stretches outward, in soft, rippling folds, reflecting the first full light of morning like polished metal. The sky above has turned a pale, gentle blue, streaked with thin, drifting clouds that glow faintly gold at their edges. For a moment you simply lie still and let the quiet settle around you. The longship continues its steady forward motion, no longer an isolated fragment in endless din, but part of a waking world. Your body carries the memory of cold in every muscle. Yet alongside that heaviness there is a quiet pride. You've endured the frozen watch. You've learned how to rest in narrow spaces, how to trust shared warmth, how to shape sleep from fragments of opportunity. Around you the crew moves with renewed purpose. Cloaks are folded away. Bundles of fur are shaken free of salt and damp. The night has been survived. The day now asks for attention. A well-recognized historical reality forms gently in your thoughts as you watch the men prepare for the hours ahead. Viking sailors relied on practical adaptability above all else. Their survival depended on the ability to turn whatever lay at hand into shelter, nourishment, or strength. The same sail that carried them across the sea became a blanket in darkness. The same oar that propelled them forward became a brace against cold planking. Sleep itself was shaped by necessity rather than comfort. A curious and somewhat humanizing detail drifts into your awareness like the echo of laughter carried across water. Some accounts of later northern voyages describe sailors teasing one another about snoring or restless movements during the night, turning hardship into shared humour that strengthened morale. Whether Viking crews indulged in similar exchanges remains uncertain, yet you can easily imagine tired smiles and quiet jokes easing the transition from night survival to morning routine. Ongoing scholarly discussion considers how much of our understanding of Viking daily life at sea is coloured by modern assumptions. Did sailors truly adapt as seamlessly as we imagine, or did each voyage demand new improvisations? Watching the quiet efficiency around you, you sense that the truth lies somewhere between. Experience provided guidance, yet the sea always retained the power to surprise. The longship glides through water that now sparkles with sunlight. Gentle swells lift and lower the hull in a motion that feels almost soothing. You stretch carefully and feel warmth spreading through stiff limbs as circulation returns. The scent of salt and damp wool begins to fade beneath the brighter smell of fresh morning air. Sound evolves as well. Seabirds call overhead. The splash of oars creates a steady rhythm that signals purposeful movement rather than anxious survival. You rise slowly and steady yourself against the curve of the hull. The wood that once felt so unforgiving now seems almost familiar beneath your hand. It has carried you through darkness. It has offered what little shelter it could. You sense a quiet gratitude for this vessel and for the knowledge embedded in its design. Human ingenuity has always found ways to endure even the harshest environments. You glance once more toward the horizon and see how the world has opened again. Distance no longer feels threatening. It feels full of possibility. The memory of night lingers like a fading dream, yet its lessons remain vivid. You understand now that sleep at sea is not simply a physical act. It is a practice of trust. Trust in companions, trust in craftsmanship, trust in the resilience of your own body. As the longship continues its journey beneath the brightening sky, a gentle calm settles over your thoughts. The hardest hours have passed. The frozen watch has given way to daylight and renewed strength. You sense that this experience will shape the way you understand comfort for the rest of your life. Warmth will never again feel ordinary. Rest will never again feel guaranteed. Now, as the crew moves with quiet confidence and the sea stretches wide and welcoming before you, you allow your breathing to slow. The rhythm of the oars becomes a soothing pulse. The sunlight softens the edges of every memory from the night. You feel yourself drifting into a deeper, more peaceful rest, no longer driven by exhaustion, but guided by the gentle assurance that you are safe for now. Let the images fade gradually. Let the sound of water become distant and soft. Imagine the longship gliding onward through calm seas that shimmer beneath a tranquil sky. Your body grows lighter. Your thoughts grow quieter. The cold releases its hold completely. There is only warmth and steady motion, and the quiet satisfaction of having endured. You are carried forward not by effort now, but by the slow, reassuring flow of time itself. Sleep deepens, breath becomes slow and even, the world softens into a peaceful blur. The sea continues its endless song somewhere far away, no longer a challenge, but a lullaby. Speaks of sweet dreams.